When most contractors think about insurance, they think about limits and deductibles. What they don't think about is classification, what type of contractor you are in the eyes of the insurance market. And that classification drives almost everything. What coverage options are available to you, how you're rated, what your policy actually covers, and where your exposures actually live. There are three categories that matter most: general contractors, subcontractors, and artisan contractors. And the difference between them isn't just a label. It's about who controls the job, who signs the contract, and who carries the downstream liability. Get the classifications wrong and the whole policy is built on a faulty assumption. General contractors have the highest complexity from any insurance standpoint. Here's why. A GC owns the job. They're responsible for the outcome, but in most cases, they're not doing all of the actual work. They're managing subcontractors, and that creates a specific risk that a lot of GCs don't fully appreciate. And if you don't control your subs properly, you inherit that mistake. You inherit their mistake. What that means practically is that underwriters want to know a few things about a GC. How much of the work do you self-perform versus subcontract out? Do you require your own subs to carry their own insurance and name you as an additional insured? What kind of projects are you running? Residential, commercial, ground-up construction? Do you have written subcontractor agreements with proper risk transfer language? The GC who can answer all of these questions clearly is a very different risk profile from a GC who says, I just hire whoever shows up. Your policy should reflect your actual operations, not a generic one. Subcontractors are in an interesting position. They don't run the job, they show up, do their trade, and they leave. But they still carry real liability for the work that they perform. The biggest risk for subs isn't the work itself, it's the contracts that they sign. Most subs I talk to sign whatever agreement the GC puts in front of them without reading it carefully. And some of those agreements contain language that shifts significant liability onto the subs for things that go way beyond their scope of work. We talked about indemnification clauses in last week's video. Subs are often the ones absorbing the broadest version of these clauses. There's also a classification question within the subcontractors category. What trade do you perform? Roofing carries different risks than painting. Electrical carries different risks than landscaping. Your specific trade determines how you're rated and what exclusions you need to watch out for. A subcontractor who hasn't had a real conversation with their agent about exactly what they do and exactly what they're signing is a subcontractor with gaps that they don't know about. Artisan contractors are your skilled tradespeople, plumbers, electricians, HVAC technicians, tile setters. The risk profile here is different from a GC or a sub in an important way. An artisan's risk lives primarily in the execution of the work itself. So if something fails, it's usually because of how the work was done or what materials were used. That means that the coverage details matter more than anything else for artisan contractors. Completed operations coverage, what protects you after the job is done, is critical for this category. So are any trade-specific exclusions in the policy? An HVAC contractor whose policy quietly excludes certain types of installation work doesn't find out until there's a water damage claim. Artisan contractor accounts are often treated as straightforward by agents who don't ask enough questions. The right agent asks what exactly you install, what you service, what your typical job size is, and what happens if something you do fails after 6 months later of doing the work. If you're a welder, what do you weld? These things matter because some welding policies will not cover automobile repair and some will. Of course, there's a price difference. Here's the thing that separates an advisor from a quoting shop. A quoting shop will ask you, what do you do, and build a policy from that answer. An advisor asks how your operations actually work and structures the coverage around the real risk. For every contractor I work with, I'm thinking about three things. Control. Do you run the job or just perform work on the job? Are you transferring risk appropriately or absorbing someone else's risk? And execution. How risky is the actual work being performed, and what happens if it fails? Those three questions tell me more about a contractor's real exposure than any application form. And they tell me whether the policy someone's been carrying for 5 years is actually built for the business that they're running today. If you've never had that conversation with your agent, or maybe it's been a few years and your business has changed, the real one, not just the renewal call, that's worth thinking about. How you market yourself online will determine exactly what an underwriter's going to do. When they look up your page and they see that you advertise that you are a roofer, a painter, and you do all these other things, then it doesn't matter what you told me, because I'm going to look you up online. So are the underwriters. And that's what we're going to go by. Because if you're advertising that you're doing something online, we're going to assume that you have exposure for those things.